Disclaimer: this video contains discussions of real criminal cases and sensitive subject matter. It is created for educational and documentary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. It was supposed to look like a break-in, a shattered window, overturned drawers, a house stripped of its peace. But beneath the chaos, something didn't add up. The picture frames were still standing. The dog hadn't barked, and in the middle of that carefully staged mess lay the body of a woman who had trusted too easily, loved too deeply, and never imagined that the danger she feared from the outside was already inside her home. Her name was Emily Carter, a high school literature teacher known for her kindness and quiet routines. She baked for her students' birthdays, kept every thank you card ever written to her, and believed the best of people even when they didn't deserve it. To her friends, she was steady. To her husband, she was convenient. And to the man who ended her life, she was the last obstacle between guilt and freedom. On a Wednesday evening in early spring, Emily followed the same gentle rhythm she always did, grading papers, cooking a simple dinner, and walking her golden retriever, Cooper. She didn't know that by nightfall her home would become a crime scene, that someone she trusted would twist her routine into evidence against her, that the story of a loving marriage would unravel into a web of lies, debt, and desperation. The next morning, police would arrive to find what looked like a violent robbery. A kitchen window smashed, jewelry scattered, furniture tossed. But what caught Detective Mara Quinn's attention wasn't what had been broken, it was what hadn't. A framed wedding photo still stood on the mantel, perfectly straight amid the destruction. A vase of flowers remained untouched on the table. It was as if whoever had torn through the house knew exactly what to disturb and what to leave untouched. Emily's husband, Andrew Hale, was the one who called 911. His voice shook as he told dispatchers he'd just returned from a business trip. He said he'd found the house in disarray, his wife unresponsive. He insisted it had to be a burglary gone wrong. But from the moment Detective Quinn stepped inside, she sensed something off, the kind of wrong that tries too hard to look right. There was no forced entry except for the one broken window. The glass lay mostly inside, not outside, suggesting the pane had been shattered from within. The drawers were pulled open, but none were actually emptied. The purse, laptop, and phone all untouched. The dog, Cooper, is calm and quiet in his bed. There was chaos, yes, but it was clean chaos, rehearsed, measured, almost artistic. Detective Quinn began her routine sweep. She noticed the faint vacuum lines in the carpet, neat stripes, running right up to the bedroom doorway, then stopping abruptly. Why would someone vacuum before a robbery? Why stop there? In her years on the force, Quinn had learned that killers lie in patterns. Their crimes often reveal as much in what they forget as in what they hide. Andrew stood outside, pale, shaking, telling anyone who would listen about his flight, his meetings, his love for Emily. But his story was too smooth, too fast. He said the missing items included a television, yet the dust on the entertainment console told a different story. There hadn't been one there in months. He said Emily must have surprised a burglar, yet there were no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, no blood beyond what surrounded her still form. By mid-morning, the coroner had confirmed what Quinn already suspected: Emily had died hours before Andrew's supposed arrival home. As investigators began collecting evidence, the house itself began to talk. The smart lock recorded entries at times that contradicted Andrew's alibi. The router logs showed his laptop connecting to the home Wi-Fi hours before his flight supposedly landed. And the voice-activated assistant on the counter, always listening, had a recorded query at 9:08 p.m. a man's voice asking for the weather in Phoenix, Emily's smartwatch filled in the rest of the story. Its heart rate data spiked violently around 10:02 p.m., then went still at 10:07 p.m. She had stopped moving entirely. The robbery was an illusion, a stage designed to sell a lie. And behind that illusion was a motive that reached deeper than greed, a marriage crumbling under debt, infidelity, and the promise of a life in insurance pay out large enough to erase it all. Detective Quinn would spend months untangling that lie, following every overlooked detail, from a bent paperclip under the dresser to a shallow footprint in the wet mulch outside. Every small clue told her the same thing. Emily didn't die at the hands of a stranger. She died because someone wanted the world to believe she did, and the saddest part, the story might have worked if the killer hadn't vacuumed before staging the scene. The morning light filtered through shattered glass, glinting off surfaces as crime scene techs captured every detail. But beneath that sterile hum of activity, Detective Mara Quinn's instincts whispered the same truth. This was not a robbery. It was a performance, and Andrew Hale was the director. From the moment she met him, something about his grief felt rehearsed. His trembling hands, the cracks in his voice, the way he over-explained everything came too easily, as though he'd studied what grief was supposed to look like. When real grief arrives, it shatters. It felt rehearsed, calculated, and as Quinn looked around the robbed home, she saw the same pattern reflected in the scene itself: mess without meaning, chaos without randomness. In Emily's bedroom, a jewelry box had been tipped over, its contents strewn across the carpet. Most of the cheap pieces were left behind, but a few valuable items were missing: a gold bracelet and a diamond necklace Andrew had given her on their anniversary. The odd part, there were no empty boxes or tangled chains to suggest the thief had rushed. Everything looked chosen, placed, arranged. Then Quinn noticed something even stranger: a faint smear of vacuum cleaner tracks running from the hallway toward the door, stopping abruptly at the bedroom entrance. Why would anyone clean a floor before ransacking a house? She crouched down, her gloved fingers tracing the carpet lines. The vacuuming had been done recently, very recently. The forensics team began dusting for prints. The glass from the broken kitchen window told another story: more shards inside than outside, suggesting it had been shattered from within. He broke it after she was gone. Quinn thought silently. He wanted it to look like someone forced their way in. She made her way outside. The rain, soaked mulch beneath the window, should have been marked by deep, muddy footprints from a fleeing burglar, but there was only one partial print, centered oddly, almost as if it had been planted rather than made naturally. It was shallow and misplaced. A real intruder would have left chaos. This looked like choreography. As Quinn pieced together the small inconsistencies, the technology began speaking, too. The smart lock on the front door showed something chilling. Andrew's unique entry code had been used at 9:02 p.m., hours before his flight supposedly landed. It had been used again at 2:11 a.m. and once more at 6:37 a.m., right before he called 911. Andrew's alibi was crumbling. When investigators pulled data from the home's router, they found Andrew's laptop had connected to the Wi-Fi around 9:06 p.m. The digital assistant's recording of his voice asking for Phoenix weather at 9:08 p.m. sealed it. He wasn't in Phoenix that night. He was home. Meanwhile, Emily's smartwatch painted the timeline of her final moments at 10:02 p.m. Her heart rate spiked sharply. Panic, adrenaline, the unmistakable pattern of struggle. By 10:07, it was flatlined. Her phone went silent. Her world ended. Detective Quinn didn't confront Andrew right away. Instead, she followed the evidence outward. She called pawn shops across the county. In one, a clerk recalled a man wearing a baseball cap and mask trying to sell a gold bracelet and necklace that matched Emily's jewelry. Surveillance footage showed a tall man with a distinctive wristwatch, one Andrew wore in every family photo. The jewelry had been pawned 3 days before the murder. It wasn't just about money anymore. This was desperation. The life insurance policy Emily never wanted but signed out of trust had been doubled 6 months earlier with a clause promising double pay in the case of accidental death during a burglary. Andrew had told her it was for security. But security for whom? Quinn's gut told her this was a man who believed he was smarter than everyone else, a manipulator confident in his ability to write his own version of reality. He'd created a scene designed to make police stop asking questions. But he underestimated the quiet things: the glass, the dust, the vacuum lines, the technology that kept its own memory. 2 weeks later, the lab returned the trace evidence. Tiny shards of glass were found inside the laundry hamper, mixed with fibers from Andrew's clothes. The kitchen floor mat carried embedded particles identical to the windowpane's composition. He'd stepped in the glass after breaking it from inside, then tried to wash away the proof. Quinn confronted him gently. She didn't accuse him outright. She simply asked him to walk her through his timeline again. He repeated his story. Phoenix, red-eye flight, arriving home to find his wife gone. But as he spoke, she placed photos in front of him. The Wi-Fi logs, the lock entries, the jewelry pawn ticket, the image of his car captured by a neighbor's doorbell camera at 2:06 a.m., headlights off. His eyes darted, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Then she showed him the last piece, Emily's smartwatch data, the heartbeat that raced and then vanished. He blinked hard, swallowed, and whispered, "That's not possible," but it was. And the science didn't lie. By the end of the week, detectives had enough to arrest Andrew Hale for the murder of his wife, Emily Carter, and for staging a robbery to cover it up. He had believed his careful performance would deceive the world. But in the end, it was undone by the smallest truths: a pattern in the carpet, a timestamp in the cloud, and the heartbeat of a woman whose story refused to be silenced. Emily's home was cleaned out weeks later, but Detective Quinn lingered in the doorway before leaving. The window had been replaced. The glass no longer glittered with false chaos. It was quiet again, heartbreakingly quiet, and for the first time since the night Emily died, the house finally told the truth. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the tapping of a pen against the prosecution's table. Andrew Hale sat at the defense bench, his face drained of its charm and confidence. The man who once believed he could outsmart everyone, including the police, the detectives, and even his wife, was now just another defendant staring at the wreckage of his own lies. Detective Mara Quinn took the stand first. Her testimony wasn't emotional, but it was surgical, every fact placed with precision, every inconsistency exposed like a wound. She didn't dramatize what happened. She didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. She described the home as it was found: the shattered glass, the scattered drawers, the untouched valuables. She explained the dust outline where the missing television should have been, revealing it hadn't been there in months. She pointed to the vacuum lines on the carpet that ended at the bedroom door, an ordinary act that became extraordinary proof. The prosecution then introduced the digital trail, the smart lock showing Andrew entering the home at 9:02 p.m. and again at 2:11 a.m., the Wi-Fi router logging his laptop connected at 9:06 p.m., the voice command for Phoenix weather at 9:08 p.m., the smartwatch recorded Emily's final moments at 10:02 p.m. Each timestamp was a nail sealing the truth shut. The pawn shop footage followed. Jurors leaned forward as the grainy video played a man wearing a baseball cap and mask handing over a gold bracelet identical to Emily's. A small scar near his temple matched one visible on Andrew in a wedding photo. Even from poor camera quality, The resemblance was undeniable. Then came the insurance policy, the one he'd doubled months before her death. It was supposed to look like financial responsibility. Instead, it became motive written in ink. The defense tried to argue that Andrew had been framed, that someone else could have known his lock code or used his laptop, that his grief had been misunderstood, but the evidence didn't bend under theory, it stood firm in reality. The forensic expert explained the glass distribution, more shards inside than outside, proving the window had been broken from within. She showed microscopic images of glass dust found in the laundry hamper, mingled with fibers from Andrew's jeans. She spoke about the vacuum cleaner pattern, the selective theft, the undisturbed frames on the wall. Every detail revealed a man who thought he could choreograph a crime scene the way he'd choreographed his life. But the final blow came from something small, something he had forgotten. Cooper, the family dog. Toxicology reports from the veterinarian revealed traces of sedatives in the dog's system. Pills prescribed for an old stomach issue, pills that Andrew had access to. It explained why Cooper hadn't barked, why he'd slept through the break-in. Andrew hadn't just planned the scene, he'd planned the silence. When the prosecution showed photos of Emily's smartwatch day, her heart rate spiking, then stopping, the courtroom fell into complete stillness. The jurors could see her final moments unfold in numbers, not words. 10:02 p.m. Panic. 10:07 gone. Detective Quinn's closing words lingered long after she left the stand. Robberies don't care about vacuum lines. Thieves don't worry about dust. This scene wasn't born from panic. It was born from planning. It wasn't rage. It was removal of a problem he no longer wanted to face. The jury deliberated for just over 3 hours. When they returned, no one met Andrew's eyes. The foreperson's voice was steady, guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of staging a crime scene to obstruct justice. Andrew's face tightened, his shoulders sagging as reality finally set in. He had lost the one thing he valued most: control. After the verdict, Detective Quinn visited Emily's school. The staff had created a small memorial in her classroom: photos, letters, a candle that stayed lit through the day. Her students had left handwritten notes. "You taught me to believe in kindness. You said the truth always finds a way. I'll miss your laugh." Quinn stood quietly at the back of the room. The desks were neatly arranged, just as Emily had left them. On the board, faint chalk lines from her last class were still visible, a quote from her favorite author: "Truth is not loud, it simply waits to be found." It struck Quinn that in the end, that's exactly what had happened. The truth waited in the dust, in the data, in the silence. It waited for someone patient enough to listen. Months later, Emily's family established a scholarship in her name, awarded each year to a student studying forensic science. The first recipient said she wanted to be the kind of investigator who listens to the quiet details. As for Andrew Hale, he was sentenced to life in prison, no parole, no redemption through denial. The man who tried to rewrite reality was now confined to a world where every truth he once ignored surrounded him. In the official report, Detective Quinn wrote one final note: "Evil doesn't always announce itself with rage. Sometimes it hides behind order, behind neat rooms, quiet voices, and carefully crafted stories. But even the cleanest lies leave fingerprints. All you have to do is look." Emily Carter's story reminds us that love should never have to fear the dark. That truth, no matter how carefully buried, always finds light. And that sometimes justice begins with the smallest clue, a piece of glass that fell the wrong way. May her memory remind us that no life is too ordinary to matter, and no lie too perfect to break. Years later, people still remembered the case not because of its brutality, but because of how ordinary it seemed. A quiet couple, a peaceful home, a staged robbery that nearly fooled everyone, but behind that facade was a lesson about how far deception can go when fueled by greed, pride, and fear. Detective Mara Quinn never forgot it. She'd worked dozens of homicides, but Emily Carter's case was different. It wasn't just about catching a killer, it was about learning how evil hides in plain sight, how it can smile at you, share dinner with you, sleep beside you, and still plan your destruction. After the trial, Quinn returned to the Carter home one last time before it was sold. The walls had been repainted, the carpet replaced, but the air still carried a strange heaviness, like the house remembered everything. She stood in the kitchen, the same place where the staged break-in began. The window had been repaired, its glass clear and smooth again, but in her mind she could still see the shards on the floor, glinting under the harsh morning light. She looked down and noticed something small near the baseboard, a sliver of broken ceramic, no bigger than a fingernail. It was part of the old bowl Emily used to keep her car keys in, a tiny remnant of normal life, of a woman who never got to lock her door again. Quinn pocketed it, not as evidence, but as a reminder, a piece of the truth that even time couldn't sweep away. Outside, the yard had grown wild. The garden Emily used to tend was overrun with weeds, the petals of long, forgotten flowers scattered by the wind. Cooper, the family dog, now lived with Emily's sister. He was old, slower now, but still gentle, still loyal to the memory of the woman who loved him most. When Quinn visited, Cooper wagged his tail weakly and rested his head on her lap, as if he too understood what had been lost. Emily's family eventually found strength in turning their pain into purpose. They created a foundation that educated people on domestic deception, on how subtle manipulation, emotional control, and hidden financial abuse often precede tragedies like this. Their message was simple: evil doesn't always break down the door. Sometimes it walks in with a key. Detective Quinn was invited to speak at the Foundation's first event. Standing before a crowd of survivors, families, and advocates, she spoke not about crime scene details or evidence, but about the power of awareness. Emily's case wasn't solved by luck. She said softly, "It was solved by the small things, by paying attention to what didn't fit. We live in a world that teaches us to overlook the quiet details, but the truth, the real truth, always lives there. You just have to listen." She paused, letting her words settle like dust in sunlight. When someone tries to make you doubt your instincts, when they rewrite every story until you question your own memory, remember this: truth doesn't shout, but it never disappears. The room fell silent, and for a brief moment everyone could feel Emily's presence, her quiet strength, her kindness, the sense of order she loved. Andrew Hale's life inside prison was a far cry from the one he'd built on lies. His cell was bare, his routine monotonous. There were no grand stories to tell anymore, no one left to believe his version of events. The man who had once tried to control everything now lived in a world where every second was dictated for him. He often requested books from the prison library, true crime, ironically, stories of people who'd tried and failed to outsmart the system. Maybe he was looking for himself in those pages. Maybe he was searching for the moment he went too far. But the truth was, it wasn't a single moment. It was a collection of small choices, each one darker than the last, leading him toward the night he could never undo. Outside those walls, the world moved on. Emily's story became a cautionary tale in investigative circles, a case study for training new detectives. Her name appeared in lectures, documentaries, and articles titled "When Staging Becomes a Signature." But for those who knew her, her students, her sister, her friends, she wasn't a headline. She was the warm smile that greeted them every morning, the steady voice that reminded them to be kind even when life wasn't. In the final report filed by Detective Quinn, there was one sentence underlined twice. Justice is not about punishment, it's about restoring truth. And that's what Emily's story became, a restoration. A reminder that even when lies are polished, rehearsed, and meticulously staged, the truth endures. It endures in data logs, in broken glass, in the silence of a loyal dog. It endures in the hearts of those who refuse to stop asking questions. The camera fades to black on a quiet street, the one Emily once called home. The porch light glows softly, just as she used to leave it. In that light, her memory lingers gentle, steadfast, and unbroken. And as the narrator's voice fades, one final line remains. The truth doesn't hide forever. It waits patient, unwavering for someone brave enough to see it. The years moved forward, but the scars left by Emily Carter's murder never truly faded. For the people who loved her, the pain became quieter, but never smaller. The town she lived in carried her story like a whisper, told to newcomers when they passed the old house on Maple Street. They'd say that's where it happened, the case that fooled everyone at first. Detective Mara Quinn, now a seasoned investigator with a growing reputation for solving staged crimes, still carried Emily's name in her heart. It was the case that changed how she looked at everything. Every crime scene she walked into after that felt different. She no longer looked only for what was there, but for what wasn't. Years later, when Quinn began training new recruits, she would always start her first session with the same question. When a house tells you it's been robbed, what's the first thing you should look at? The rookies would answer with enthusiasm: the window, the door, the valuables, the points of entry. She'd let them finish before shaking her head gently. No, you look at what survived, because lies are loud, but truth is subtle. It hides in what remains untouched. Emily's case became a teaching tool in law enforcement circles. The official title, the Hale staging case. Detectives learned about glass distribution, digital footprints, and vacuum lines. But behind every technical detail was a human cost. A woman who trusted, a family who grieved, a life extinguished because one man believed he could rewrite reality. In time, the Carter family used the settlement from the insurance company. Not the blood money Andrew intended to steal, but what was rightfully Emily's, to expand the foundation they'd started in her memory. It became known as the Light Project, their mission to help victims recognize warning signs in manipulative relationships and to teach law enforcement how to spot staged domestic crimes. At one of the foundation's yearly memorials, a framed photo of Emily stood on a table surrounded by white lilies. Her sister, Grace, spoke softly to the crowd. She believed in patterns. Grace said, "In literature, in life," she said, "everything leaves clues if you're willing to look." And she was right. Even in her final moments, Emily left behind the truth. We just had to listen. In the audience, Detective Quinn watched silently. She had been invited as an honorary speaker, but chose not to take the podium. Her voice belonged to the work, not the spotlight. Instead, she stood near the back, clutching that small ceramic fragment she had found near the baseboard of Emily's kitchen years ago. A piece of the bowl that once held car keys and little scraps of normal life. A reminder that even the smallest things can carry meaning. Later that evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the hall had emptied, Quinn stepped outside into the cool night air. The moonlight glowed faintly across the parking lot. She looked down at the piece of ceramic in her hand, its edges smoothed over time. She thought about how many cases she'd solved since Emily's, how many times she'd seen the same story play out. A killer who thought he could stage a lie so convincing that truth would stay buried forever. But it never worked, because in the end, no matter how careful, every lie leaves a fingerprint. Every secret forgets one small detail. The story of Emily Carter had become more than a case. It had become a message. Her name appeared in detective manuals, college lectures, and podcasts. Her life, her quiet, orderly, kind-hearted life, had inspired a wave of awareness that saved others from meeting the same fate. And though Andrew Hale would die behind prison walls years later, his story faded quickly. His name became a footnote, a cautionary example of arrogance and cruelty. Emily's name, however, endured. It became a symbol of persistence, of truth rising through the cracks. On the 10th anniversary of the case, a journalist interviewed Detective Quinn for a feature titled "The Murder That Taught Police to Listen Differently." When asked what stayed with her the most after all these years, Quinn paused for a long moment before answering. "It wasn't the evidence," she said. "It wasn't the confession. It was quiet. That house was screaming the truth, but not with words. You could hear it in the stillness, the way certain things were left untouched, the way the air felt heavy in the rooms where love had turned into danger. The truth doesn't need to be shouted. It waits, patient and steady, for someone to see it." She smiled faintly. "Emily helped me see it." The article ended with Quinn's reflection, one that resonated with millions who read it. Sometimes evil hides behind order. Sometimes love wears a mask. But even when the world believes a lie, the truth is still there waiting. Because no matter how carefully you stage a scene, you can't rehearse it. The silence of guilt. The final scene fades in on the old Carter house, now owned by another family. A wind chime swings gently by the porch, playing a soft melody. Inside, children's laughter echoes faintly, a sound of life restored, of peace reclaimed. The camera pans toward the mantel where a single framed photo remains, a copy left behind by the new owners when they moved in. It's Emily's picture, smiling in her classroom. On the back of the frame, written in fading ink, are 4 words she once told her students: "Truth always finds light." And as the music fades and the screen darkens, the narrator's final words echo softly. "In a world where lies can be staged, may we always look closer, because the truth, no matter how quiet, never stops whispering." "You said," Outro ChatGPT said, "behind every crime scene is a story not of horror, but of humanity." Emily Carter's story reminds us that monsters don't always wear masks or break down doors. Sometimes they smile across the dinner table, hold your hand, and promise forever while planning something unspeakable. But Emily's legacy isn't her death, it's her truth. A truth that spoke through dust, glass, and silence. A truth that refused to stay buried under lies, because even in her final moments, she left behind enough light for the world to see what darkness tried to hide. This story is for the victims who never got to tell their side, for the investigators who listen to what others overlook, and for every soul who believes that truth, no matter how long it takes, will always find its way home. If you or someone you know is living in fear, or if something in your life doesn't feel right, please reach out for help. Silence protects the abuser, not the victim. To Emily's family, friends, and the students who still remember her warmth, this episode carries our deepest sympathy. May her memory continue to remind us that evil can fake chaos, but it can never fake truth. Because no matter how carefully a lie is staged, the truth always finds its light.